I don't know who this guy is. I was scrolling through shorts like an idiot, and I found a guy talking about evolution like an idiot. I don't think he knew what he was talking about, but you let me know in the comments if you think I'm wrong, all right? Now, since this is a short video, I'm not cutting any of it out. You get to see the whole video because it's less than a minute long.
Evolution is based on 4 major ideas. None of them have ever been observed.
Evolution is defined as a change in allele frequencies over time. It's a little bit jargony, so let's redefine it with just a couple more casual usage words. Evolution is the change in the traits of a population, the physiological traits of a population over time. Now, I am racking my brain and I cannot think of 4 principles of evolution that neatly explain evolution, but I can do this guy better. I can do it in 2. Number 1, offspring are not exactly like their parents. And number 2, species will tend to produce more offspring than will survive to reproduce. Just those 2 things. I don't think anyone who's watching this video is going to be able to say, well, yeah, but out-of-body atheist, we don't have any evidence that children don't look exactly like their parents. Or, yeah, but out-of-body atheist, we don't have any evidence that not everyone survives to have kids. These are both things that in the course of our human lifetimes, unless, we're one of the 2/3 of pregnancies that resulted in a miscarriage, we're gonna experience those things. We're gonna see a baby that looks a little bit like mom and a little bit like dad and also a lot like itself. We're gonna see, hopefully, we don't have to experience our own siblings dying before they reproduce, but we're gonna see somebody's siblings die before they reproduce, right? And we're also gonna see a lot of animals die before they reproduce if we get to live, into any kind of adulthood. It's just it's lived experience for most of the human race, these 2 things. So clearly we have evidence for them. From our highly evidenced background, we're going to focus on thing 1, that each of a set of offspring is different from its parents and also, unless they're identical twins, different from each other. So each offspring is unique, and each offspring represents a collection of traits, some from mom and some from dad. Still with me? Is this too hard? Might be too hard for what's his name I'm responding to, but I know it's not too hard for you. Now, if we do choose to reproduce and survive long enough to do so, our own offspring are going to be different from us. They're going to have a collection of traits, some from us and some from whoever we reproduce with, correct? So just from that first thing, we have a lot of mixing of traits going on over time. Successive generations are going to look successively different from the generations before them on average. Like 10 generations into the future is going to collectively, on average, look different from us. All right, now let's bring in the second fact, the second very evident fact, that not everyone survives to reproduce. Not everyone gets to pair off, not every pair is fertile together, and not everyone, yeah, that's it. So that's happening too now, okay? So that means that some recombinations, some mixtures of mom and dad can't happen. Or some of them just get randomly deleted. We're not doing natural selection. We're just letting, let it be random. Okay, so those are the 2 things. I jumped the gun. So those 2 things over time are going to lead collectively to the difference 10 generations down and 100 generations down on average. Okay, so from that random mixing and birthing and dying and changing over time, we get a thing that is in evolution called genetic drift. Genetic drift is something we consider independently of mutations and independently of natural selection. We don't have to care about them. Genetic drift would happen even if those things didn't happen, just as a function of assortative mating. Well, not even assortative mating, that's natural selection. Just if everyone mated at random and, people were just slipping on banana peels at random, you'd still get genetic drift. So we don't have to think about any of those things in evolution that are confusing for people. There's changes over time in the population, in the traits we see expressed on average. Now, not only that, but we can see major changes. We can see either, number one, a trait will spread through the entire population at random, without natural selection, without assortative mating, without mutations. A trait that was present in generation 1 could, by some generation, just be present in everyone. When that happens, in evolutionary biology, we say that that trait has become fixed in the population. From that point on, everyone forever will have that trait unless something significant happens. Now, we can also see traits disappear. The mixtures of traits, maybe there's just a very unlucky trait. It seems to have been extra prone to banana peels over time. After a point, it doesn't get passed on anymore. And that trait has been extinguished from the population. I don't remember what we call that deletion. Okay, so we'll ignore giving it a formal name in evolutionary biology, but it can happen without natural selection. Those are big changes. And we have evidence for everything that happens in that chain of events. And all of that collectively results in something that we can all agree fits the definition of evolution. And the big TLDR point I'm making at this point in the video is we have evidence for evolution. You, sitting in your living room or riding your bike and hopefully only listening, not watching right now, you have evidence for everything I talked about. There are other ways for evolution to happen. We do have mutations. We do have natural selection. But even ignoring them, we have a fully evidenced pathway by which evolution can occur in a population according to the definition of evolution as is used by real biologists, not whatever the hell this guy is. So, before we move on, were there any parts of this process that you think we do not observe? Let me know down in the comments.
Number one, that life comes from non-life. We have not one single example of life coming from non-life.
Evolution is not about where life came from. Evolution begins with life. Evolution is changes in population over time. If there is no population, there's no population to change over time. There's no evolution. The theory of evolution doesn't account for the formation of the universe or the formation of life on Earth any more than the theory of gravity accounts for the formation of the universe or the formation of life on Earth. And yet, if I were to go up to some stranger on the street and say, gravity doesn't explain why I look different from my parents, why do you believe in gravity? Obviously, it's stupid. I would deserve the laughter that I would be on the receiving end of, because with gravity, we don't have our egotistical clinging to specialness that makes us refuse to look at obvious evidence. Everybody accepts gravity. Gravity doesn't insult anybody, and so it's widely accepted, and we know what it explains and what it doesn't. Evolution is actually as simple as gravity. We know more about how evolution works than we do about how gravity works, and yet here we are in a timeline where most of the people who think they're discrediting evolution don't even know what the hell it is or what it includes and excludes. The science that is about where life came from is called abiogenesis, or without life beginning. So, life had to start somewhere, basically. And the thing is, creationists and scientists all believe in abiogenesis. It's just that scientists say, well, it must have been natural processes because we know that natural processes exist. We have evidence for natural processes. And creationists say, well, it must have been God because it must have been God because it must have been God. Abiogenesis begins with the basic building blocks of life. So we have chemistry, we have chemistry, we have chemistry, we have self-perpetuating chemistry that gradually changes over time in response to its environment. That's where abiogenesis starts. Evolution starts after abiogenesis, takes us to a cell. So it's pretty clearly demarcated, and that doesn't make it special. Every aspect of science is demarcated in this way. Plate tectonics, even though we might be looking at soil strata that contains fossils, plate tectonics doesn't touch fossils. It just touches how the continents move over time. And it's going to be folding layers, and it's going to be deforming layers and annihilating layers, and it's still not about those layers even. That's a different part of geology that explains the layers, and geology still doesn't explain the fossils in those layers. There's clear demarcation throughout all of science. So this isn't some weird thing we're doing to put Satan's hypnosis on you and tempt you away from the church. It's just how science works. Now, before we move on, I should probably talk about what it means to be alive. What does it mean to be alive? What do you think it means? Tell me in the comments. Can you describe and define what is alive and what is not? Give me a list of criteria that allow us to, categorize living things from non-living things. I'm serious. I don't seem serious because I was being most unserious, but also serious. Pause the video. Then after we come back from the pause, we can see how close you come to my definition. Please do not Google it. That's cheating. All right. I hope you actually paused the video and left a comment, at least for the algorithm. If there are a lot of comments, I might not read them all. Don't take it personally. But thank you. Thank you, each and every one of you who did it. All right. So there's no formal, universal definition for life. We may think we understand what life is intuitively, but we're wrong. That's why you see scientists arguing about things like whether or not viruses are alive or whether or not prions are alive, because they do some, but not all, of the things in the definition for life. So here are some of the most common criteria for what it means to be alive. And yeah, I'm going to be reading my notes, because there's like 7 of them, and I've had COVID, so I can't hold 7 things in my head at once. All right, so a living thing maintains some kind of homeostasis. It maintains an internal environment that is discrete from the external environment and stable. So for example, ways that I am maintaining homeostasis is I have a body temperature that fluctuates within a narrow range around 98 point something degrees Fahrenheit, or what was that, 27 degrees Celsius? Another way that I have homeostasis is that my body is about the same percentage water whether I'm in a rainforest or in a desert. Another way I maintain homeostasis is that my fluids, my blood specifically, is within a very narrow, tight range of pH, no matter what I eat or excrete. So these are all ways that my living body is maintaining homeostasis, and hopefully yours too. All right, the second criterion is that living things are organized. Earth life is organized as cells. Is all life going to be cells? Maybe not by our earthly definition of cells. There's going to be some sort of unit of life in all of the life, probably. Because you have to have a unit to have reproduction of that unit. But that's another criteria. Living things have a metabolism. A metabolism has 2 subparts. You have the catabolism, where you're breaking things down. You're breaking things down from inside yourself. You're also breaking things down from outside yourself. And you have an anabolism, where you're building things up, typically inside yourself. But if you're like a mollusk, I don't know if the shell can technically be considered inside your body if you're a mollusk. So you're anabolically building up that shell as well. Anabolism typically consumes energy, and catabolism typically releases energy. All right, and then all living things have to use energy from some source to maintain this metabolism. That's the other thing I had on there. Number 4, living things grow. They're going to increase in size and they're going to reproduce. Yeah, they're going to be, no, not reproduce. They're going to increase in size and they're going to build new internal structures. Reproduction is another thing. Living things adapt. So future generations of that living thing are going to be different from prior generations of that living thing in response to the environment and in ways that hopefully will help them survive better in the environment. That's adaptation. All right, the 6th thing, responding to stimuli. If you are alive, you're going to be able to sense your environment by some means, and you're going to be able to change something internally in response to that environment. You may also have an external change, but not all of our responses to stimuli are external. All right, now the last thing that I kept trying to go to early is that living things reproduce. Whether your reproduction is sexual or asexual, you gotta make more or you're gonna die out. I mean, technically, you could have a thing that satisfies all the criteria for life and doesn't reproduce, but you're gonna run out of that thing, because whether or not you reproduce, if you're alive, you can die. There are no non-living things that do homeostasis, but there are lots of synthetic things in our lives that do homeostasis. For example, cruise control on your car maintains homeostasis with respect to the road. You are going to travel at the same rate of speed thanks to your cruise control in your car relative to the road. That is homeostasis. Thermostat maintains temperature homeostasis in your house. Crystals are a really great example of a non-living thing that has a high degree of organization. Any crystal is going to be highly organized and it's going to have repeating units inside of it. There we have examples of non-living things that grow, like crystals, again, fire. Stalactites grow from the ceiling down to the floor of a cave. Yeah, is that stalactites or stalagmites? It's tough. Correct me in the comments. Viruses are considered non-living, but they adapt. Damn, do they adapt. They adapt so well. We have to have a new flu shot every year. There are no non-living things that naturally occur that we know of that respond to stimuli, but we synthesize a lot of sensors, and that is literally their job. We have photosensors, we have chemosensors, we have thermometers, which is a type of sensor. Well, a thermocouple would be a more active sensor. Viruses, prions, crystals, and fire can all reproduce. You start with a little, you wind up with a lot. So far, we have not discovered or synthesized any non-living thing that can metabolize, but when, not if we do, we will have the potential to construct, to design and build a non-living thing that has all of those 7 properties of life. And then we kind of have to wonder, is it alive? I know it's a machine, but so is a cell. Let me know down in the comments how we would differentiate machine life from traditional, natural life, or if you even think we can. So you might be saying, well, a robot is made of stuff that's not alive, therefore the robot itself cannot be alive. But I submit to you, so is a cell. Not one part of a cell is alive independent of the cell. Only together are the parts of a cell alive. We can't argue that robots can never be alive because they're made of non-living stuff, because so are we. All our stuff is dead. We are all of us, not just the atheists, dead inside. If life is just a special arrangement of non-living matter, we cannot claim that life cannot come from non-life. In biology, we do have a principle called biogenesis. Biogenesis states that living things can only arise from other living things. So what, am I contradicting myself here? Because I just said that maybe life can arise from non-living things, and now I'm saying life cannot. I can't have it both ways. Oh, but yes, I can. Biogenesis was actually framed as a principle in response to spontaneous generation, which was popular for freaking ever, man. So people used to think that if you leave meat out to get stinky, it will spontaneously generate flies, just for example. And one way we disproved that is we put a barrier around the meat that was still permeable enough that it could get stanky. And we found that the barrier kept flies from appearing. Very simple experiment. But prior to that, people thought that illnesses and insects and all sorts of things would just randomly appear if the conditions were right for it. And biogenesis is the refutation of that. Biogenesis does not mean that life can never have arisen from non-life. It's more of a description of the current state of affairs. Currently, life cannot arise from non-living material. So what's changed? Everything. The world without life in it was a very different place. I mean, for one thing, we didn't have all this atmospheric pollution around here that allows me to have an oxygen-based metabolism. Life hadn't gotten around yet to polluting the air with toxic oxygen. And because of that, cell membranes didn't have to be as freaking amazing. Life wouldn't have needed all of the internal defenses against oxygen that modern life has. Proto-life in the current environment would immediately die of oxygen poisoning. And any proto-life in our modern environment that didn't randomly die of oxygen poisoning would be eaten by far more advanced life that had been evolving for over 3.5 billion years, almost 4 billion years. And I mean, it would be like a confrontation between a Neanderthal population and a nuclear power, is how lopsided it would be. A nuclear power without morals or ethics or any reticence to wipe out Neanderthals. And nuclear power that was also cannibals and would gleefully eat those Neanderthals after nuking them. So there was no evidence that those Neanderthals ever existed. That is now. We, collectively, all life on Earth, are that nuclear power. We have so many biological weapons that we've developed just to live with each other as living things that a primitive organism wouldn't stand a chance and wouldn't even leave a smear of evidence. We would annihilate it completely. So now, biogenesis is the rule, but without life, there's nothing to stop abiogenesis.
Number two, that all the life forms that we have today came from single-cell life forms. Many people do not know that while we do have single-cell life forms that we call bacteria, we have no two-celled life forms, we don't have three-cell life forms, we don't have four-cell life forms, we don't even have five-cell life forms. That is, we go from single-cell bacteria to complex life forms.
We actually have observed single-celled life clumping up in response to predation. Where there are predators, monocellular life becomes colonial life. Something that is small enough to eat, monocellular life, unicellular life, is not going to have teeth. So all you got to do to become uneatable, inedible, is make yourself bigger than they're able to encapsulate. And so we do see under those conditions very, very small, very, very simple proto-multicellularity arise in the modern world. We also have quite a few examples of unicellular organisms like slime molds that behave collectively like a multicellular organism, even though all the cells are the same and they're not even necessarily related to each other beyond the species level. They're going to act multicellular, and they have complex behaviors as a result of that. Volvox is an example of a colonial organism with differentiated cells. So some cells are specialized for reproduction and the rest all are doing the survival thing for those reproductive cells. You can observe Volvox colonies with baby Volvox colonies inside. I think Volvox are some of the most beautiful organisms to look at alive in a microscope. They're just watching them drift and kind of rotate and the light shine through them from your whatever light source you're using. It's really nice. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't had a chance to look at a Volvox in person, it does feel different from all the video of Volvox that you can watch online. So get out in the world, touch some grass, look at some Volvox. Volvox are still relatively large. You're going to find between 500 and 50,000 cells. Tetrabaena is a colonial algae that is composed of just 4 cells. 4 cells. That's one of those number of cells that what's-his-face says we never observe. They belong to the same order of life as Volvox. Goniaceae is a family of alga from the very same order, of course, as Volvox. And that includes Gonium, that's a genus, and members of genus Gonium can range from 4 cells to 16 cells, so still very small. Many of them within the range that what's-his-face says we never see. Yes, we do. So there's a lot of very simple life. There's a lot of life within the range of what he said. And then, yeah, we do have unicellular life. Why do we never see 3? Why do we never see 5? Well, let's think about how life reproduces at the unicellular level. I mean, if you're down with that few cells, it doesn't make a lot of sense to produce sperm, which are also a cell, right? So you're reproducing by division. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. You don't get any 3s or 5s or 7s in that range. It wouldn't make sense to expect it. Now, this late in the evolutionary game, it doesn't make sense to be intermediary between unicellular and multicellular. And even though it doesn't make sense, we still find it because it's still re-evolving. Because under some circumstances, it's still better to be multicellular even if you're very small. But let's think about it. Why would you not want to be tiny and colonial? Why don't you want to be a 2-celled or a 4-celled or a 16-celled organism? It's actually all about metabolism again. It all goes back to metabolism. Okay, if you're a unicellular organism, right, you have the maximal surface area compared to your internal environment. In fact, the smaller you are, the more efficiently you can eat because you don't have an orifice, you're just one cell. Yeah, I see you, protozoa, laughing at me with your vacuoles and shit. Shut up. You don't have like a formal orifice, like the one I'm flapping at you right now. So you're taking things in through your cell membrane. Your cell membrane or cell wall is how much you can eat at a time. So a bacterium is going to survive more efficiently as a unicellular organism than a human-sized cell, because bacteria are quite a bit smaller than our cells. And that's why most of the unicellular organisms that we see in the wild are bacteria-sized. It just makes more sense from the perspective of eating without a mouth. But you are prey to larger things. Okay, on a larger scale, it makes sense to be bigger. Because the bigger you are, the more things you can eat and the fewer things can eat you. There's going to be an empty space in design space of life because there are benefits to being very, very, very small, and there are benefits to being relatively very large. C. elegans is very large compared to a bacterium. But there isn't really any benefit in occupying the intermediary space between very small and relatively very large, because you're going to be shit relative to the bacteria at absorbing nutrients from your environment. They're going to outcompete you. You're also going to be very vulnerable to the larger things that can just slurp you up. So that little island of emptiness in life space has a very simple explanation that whoever the hell I'm responding to probably would not understand, because he's clearly an idiot. Looking at the modern world and demanding to know why it isn't like the world in the distant past seems to me either like a dishonest debate tactic or lack of imagination.
The third postulate of evolution is that time and chance drive evolution forward, of course, and time works against evolution. The chance of one simple 100-unit protein coming together by accident, time and chance make evolution absolutely impossible.
I'm not just a biologist. In fact, I have rarely used my biology degree professionally. I used it a little bit when I was a middle school science teacher. Mostly in a professional capacity, I've gotten the most use out of my chemistry minor. I've been a chemistry tutor, and after that, I worked as an analytical chemist in a laboratory setting quite a bit. Did a little bit of chemical synthesis, not a lot. So that's going to come in handy now, because our ignorant friend just dropped us from the world of evolution into the world of chemistry. So our ignorant friend talked about the improbability of a 100-unit protein forming outside of a cell. Probability is where this guy's argument doesn't just fail, it bursts into flames. That's because he's not actually talking about probability in the sense that scientists talk about probability. He's just talking about what seems unlikely to him. But unfortunately, in the real world that we all have to share with each other, things that seem unlikely happen all the time. Protein formation is so likely that it happens in space. We have found proteins in meteorites. We have observed the formation of protein chains in the laboratory when we are synthesizing the conditions in space. So protein formation is more likely than humans figuring out how to build a car, because as far as we know, that only happened here on Earth. All right, the way he talks about the issue underscores his misunderstanding.
The chance of one simple 100-unit protein coming together by accident, time and chance make evolution absolutely impossible.
So I call this the serial trials fallacy. It turns out it's not my original idea. Other people talk about a serial trials fallacy. It is not a recognized formal fallacy, but it is a really stupid idea. And what that comes down to is, in our human brains, where we do one thing at a time, we imagine natural processes as happening one at a time, one time ever at a time. And that's where this idea that protein formation is unlikely comes from, is because we fail to recognize that nature is vast and it does a lot of things all the time, all at once. So if chances of something happening in a 1 billion unit system are 1 in a billion, that thing is certain to happen, right? Because you have enough units in your system that you don't have to wait very long to see the result, even though 1 in a billion seems like really long odds. Nature is a massive system. When we're doing chemistry, say I'm doing a chemical reaction with a yield of 1 gram of product for every kilogram of reactant. It's still a certainty that I'm going to get that 1 gram of product, because when I'm doing my chemical synthesis, literally billions of chemical reactions,
billions and billions,
are going on all the time until the reaction conditions change to stop the reaction or until I run out of reactants. I'm not going to get 100% this product that I want. I'm going to get a lot of stuff, and maybe 0.1% of that stuff is going to be my product. And that's acceptable because that's still actually, for some syntheses, a lot of product. Reactions can also proceed in steps. And again, we're going to be vulnerable to that serial trials fallacy. We're going to picture the steps happening one at a time and having to happen in a certain way. But in chemistry, that's false. The steps are happening all at once. So specifically with respect to protein synthesis, that is a simple dehydration reaction. So the hydrogen portion of the amine functional group is going to react with the hydroxide portion of a carboxylic group on another amino acid. They're going to hook up. They're going to form H2O. So we call it dehydration because we're taking out an H2O, and that's going to leave the 2 units stuck together. The ends of every amino acid consist of an amino group and a carboxylic group plus a functional group. That's just the amino acid skeleton. So as long as the conditions in which we find these amino acids are conducive to dehydration reactions, they're going to keep linking up. They're going to keep hooking up. A 100-chain protein under those conditions really isn't any less probable than a 2-chain protein or a 5-chain protein or a 10-chain protein. I'm going to end up with a lot of proteins with a lot of different units, numbers, and they're all pretty much equally likely. I mean, they're going to kind of fall into a bell curve, just like every other probabilistic thing happening in large numbers does. So mostly I'm going to get some number of units in my chain, and then I'm going to have a lot more, and I'm going to have a lot less. And whatever some number is in the middle is going to depend on the concentration of those units and how much time I have available for the reaction to happen, and really nothing else. It's all going to happen chaotically, all at once, in every possible way. There are trillions of chemical reactions happening all at once in a puddle. I mean, in every puddle. Every puddle you look at, you are seeing, it looks like a puddle, right? It looks like nothing's happening, and that's fine, but there are trillions of chemical reactions happening in that puddle. If the chances of a chemical reaction occurring in a puddle are 1 in a trillion, it is a certainty that that chemical reaction will happen in that puddle because there are just so many chemical reactions in the puddle. Now think of a whole earth of puddles. How unlikely a reaction is to occur really doesn't matter given enough time or the right conditions or both. The universe itself is so much larger than a puddle. And a puddle is mind-blowing compared to how simple our random dude's mind is who cannot comprehend that life is not an assembly line. Chemistry in a laboratory or in nature is massively parallel, with billions, with a Sagan, reactions happening all at once, all the time.
The fourth postulate that evolution is based on is that what we see today, minor genetic variation in species, is evidence of macroevolution. So because cats are different colors, dogs are different sizes, that means that fish turned into cows. And of course, we know that that's not true.
That entire clip was a compound straw man fallacy. It's like 2 straw men formed the arms, 2 straw men formed the legs, and 1 straw man formed the body and head. And you got like a straw man Voltron happening there. We're gonna have to take this Strawman Voltron, one lion at a time. All right, first, minor variation can't explain macroevolution. We don't really talk about micro and macroevolution in science very much. You can have a little evolution, you can have a lot of evolution. It's all evolution. So let's imagine that I get off my tuchus at this stupid desk I'm always sitting at, and I walk for 5 steps, and 5 more steps, and 5 more steps, until I've walked for 5 miles. Is there some barrier that I can only overcome by not walking in steps anymore, by doing something different? Is there some physiological process that keeps me from walking 5 miles, 1 step at a time? Is it impossible to walk 5 miles? Because I've never with my own eyes observed anyone walking every step of 5 miles, because come on, that's boring. I'm gonna look away. I'm gonna check out what the foliage in the trees is doing. I'm gonna be distracted by a squirrel. I'm gonna be distracted by my phone. Nobody has probably ever watched every step of a 5-mile walk. Would I be reasonable to claim that because nobody's seen every step, it is impossible to walk for 5 miles? Number 2, fish turned into cows. He is closer than he thinks he is, but he would be astonished to learn that cows are still fish. You never escape your clade. I don't mean that in the colloquial sense. I mean it in the cladistic sense. The clade fish, including fish and all of their descendants, is fish. We're all fish. I'm a fish. Cows are fish. Dogs are fish. Cats are fish. Fish are fish. Insects, snails, and worms are not fish. There are still monkeys, even though we evolved from monkeys, because we never stopped being monkeys. Also, because when you're born, you don't annihilate your parents.
Subscribe to see more shorts like this.
I don't recommend subscribing to their channel unless your goal is to deepen your ignorance. But I do think it would be a good idea to subscribe to my channel, especially if you came here expecting a fight and you accidentally learned something. Make sure you like this video if you liked it as well. I've been the Out-of-Body Atheist, and I hope you all have fun playing with your straw lions. Make me a Voltron.